I don't want to compare difficulties, but we have a little sense, Jill and I, what it's like to lose a home. Years ago, now 15 years ago, I was in Washington doing Meet the Press. It was a sunny Sunday, and lightning struck at home on a little lake. It's outside of our home, not a lake, a big pond, and hit a wire and came up underneath our home into the heating ducts, the air conditioning duct. To make a long story short, I almost lost my wife, my 67 Corvette, and my cat.
That's the President of the United States after he finally decided to make a comment on Hawaii, on Maui. And I am really, as a Christian, trying to suppress the hatred that I'm developing for this man. Not dissatisfaction with his job as the President of the United States and his policies, but the callous nature of this man is beginning to pierce my emotions in a way that I don't want to feel about another human. Let's get to our friend Jim Carafano, senior counselor to the President and E.W. Richardson Fellow for International Engagement at the Heritage Foundation. Jim Carafano, thank you for being with us today, Jim. I'll tee it up for you. The president's final finality of his response to what is taking place in Lahaina. What's your reaction to that?
Well, one, like everybody else, I'm just speechless. But he is consistent. He is not the consoler-in-chief. He's the bystander-in-chief and the tourist-in-chief. But I think back, for example, when the Challenger thing blew up, and Reagan went on TV and made, I think, the most comforting, inspirational. I mean, I don't even know who wrote that, but it was just everything he said was perfect. I mean, he consoled the nation, and this was not that. But my first response to this is somebody, kind of grew up in the Homeland Security space when I started Heritage. That was my space. And so disaster response was something that, I worked on a lot. I went down for Deepwater Horizon. I went down after Hurricane Katrina, went to a number of different disasters working for Heritage. And what really struck me is the difference in the media treatment between Bush and Katrina, Trump and Puerto Rico, and Biden here. I mean, this is, arguably, the state and local response is the real root of the disaster, and probably deserves a lion's share of the criticism. But the response in both Katrina and Puerto Rico were absolutely politics. It was aimed at attacking and degrading the president. Didn't matter what the truth on the ground was. Didn't matter what the federal response was. Didn't matter the context. And nothing mattered except the fact that they had to attack President Bush and President Trump for political gain. Here we see exactly the opposite. It doesn't matter what the facts on the ground are. The media's job is to shield the president from any claim of responsibility. And the other thing, which is just completely egregious, is anytime there's an extreme weather event, and extreme weather can be anything. It can be heat wave, wildfire, drought, hurricane, tornado, you name it. The first answer is, well, this is climate change. Mm-hmm. When the science is actually very, very clear on this, there is no correlation between extreme weather events and climate change. Even the climate yahoos say this. And yet this is the buzzword, which we're just supposed to accept that what this means is no matter what goes wrong, we need more woke. When in reality here, the real rooted disaster is that state and local officials really failed the people on the ground.
We're speaking with Jim Carafano about the tragedy that took place in Lahaina on Maui in Hawaii, and the president made his way there. I mean, I've heard people discuss, the presence of the President of the United States can be very disruptive. So some people say, we don't need the president on the ground immediately because it hinders the ability to recover anything that can be recovered. when it comes to the American people and our brothers and sisters in Hawaii right now, is there a historical significance to this fire and this tragedy and what it has done to that island that is being overlooked because our attentions are easily swayed in other directions?
Well, I mean, the number one, look, the reason why these extreme weather events cause more destruction is people increasingly live in higher population, in higher densities, in places where there are extreme events. It's true for the tsunami in Japan. It's true for hurricanes in Florida and Texas. The reason why there's more destruction from hurricanes is not because we have more hurricanes or more powerful hurricanes. It's more people live in hurricane zones. So, and look, it's a free country. If people want to live in these places, get that. But then you have to invest in the preparedness and response to make sure that you can deal with these disasters. I personally think that of all the disasters you can have, mass deaths from a forest fire is completely inexcusable. I mean, there is a forest fire, you evacuate people immediately, and you err on the side of caution. And the exact opposite was done here. And I mean, there was no warning. And look, the reality is, you cannot outrun a fire.
Right.
This is, I don't know if you remember, there's this really famous. There's a great book on this, Men in Fire. There's a folk song about this, about these jump guys that were parachuted in to fight a small fire, and it raged out of control, and they ran uphill, which is a bad thing because you can't outrace a fire, and all but a handful of them died. But when fires move, they move fast, and there is no way to protect people from it. And the only way to really protect people is to either stop the fire or move the people. And in this case, neither was done. And I see this as just a completely needless tragedy.
Jim Carafano joining us right now. We're talking about the fire crisis in Hawaii, and I'm trying to follow this story, but the horrific nature of some of the details that really have just begun to come out, it's very hard for me to consume it, and maybe I have a responsibility to do that. So I'll keep covering it and researching it. But there were sirens. They didn't run the sirens, and there are reasons. They said that if they would have run the sirens, that means tsunami, which means people would have run to the place that the fire was coming from, and that would have potentially caused danger. They didn't have water access as soon as they should. How do all of these things fail at the same time?
Well, okay. Well, first of all, when you live in a tsunami zone and a forest fire zone, this is something that maybe you ought to think about beforehand, that as part of your public information, public awareness, and public safety campaign, that you can distinguish between tsunamis and forest fires. And so the fact that they had a situation where they were afraid that people were confused, that in itself is beyond inexcusable. I mean,
it's a great
completely
point.
Beyond inexcusable. Yeah. I mean, look, tsunamis are, maybe you normally, with tsunamis, because you get a fair amount of warning, and it's really not hard. It's like, dude, just get uphill,
Yeah.
And so it is. So that kind of alert is really, really important. But it's the same way in forest fires. I mean, this is an area that was prone to forest fires. You just have to prepare for these things, and where you have a dense population, it's even more important. So once a disaster strikes, there's very little you can do other than experience the horror of the disaster. When there's a mass fire, and there's nothing you can do, and there's almost no way you can survive. Same thing if you're there when the tsunami hits. 99% of preventing death is by actions that you take before the disaster. It's just like a tornado. Most people die in a tornado because they don't take very, very basic protective measures. One is you get watches and warnings in a tornado. You take them seriously, and then you get to a place where you're going to be protected, whether it's a bathroom in the middle of the house or in the basement, or you get off the road. You get out of people that die normally are people that are on the road. They're exposed, and that's why they die. A lot of these deaths are preventable, but it's all about the preparation beforehand. And again, I'm sorry, especially on an island, which the logistics of disaster response are always harder because you got to get there, you got to get people on, you got to get people off. And when you have a dense population, you have to be really serious about this. It's not, and the thing is we've been focused. I mean, theoretically, we've had the Great Mississippi Flood, and we've had the San Francisco earthquake and the San Francisco fire, but after 9/11, we got together as a country and we said, oh, well, we're going to take disaster preparedness seriously. And it's obviously that they really haven't. And as somebody that's been in this business for 20 plus years, I just find it, kind of inexcusable, to be honest.
Jim, when I'm looking,
it's like,
go ahead.
Well, no, I was going to say, like Katrina, I think that was a preventable disaster too, but much of the criticism was about the disaster response. And this is also true in Puerto Rico. But once the disaster happens, dude, the damage is done. Puerto Rico's an island. It's hard to get to. If you don't have an emergency management system in place, if you don't have a resilient electrical grid, then you're done. I mean, the same thing in Louisiana. It was a terrible disaster response, preparedness, bad plans, and then they blame the people. And then the difference, of course, is okay, maybe there's actually not a lot that the federal government can do in the wake of this disaster, but that didn't stop them from going after. And the problem with this is, these are moments of education. People pay attention to disasters because they've lived with them in their lives, or they see these experiences. And then what happens is we just all go back to sleep. But when these things happen, people need to pay attention, because you can save your life and your family in a lot of these situations if you just do very basic, simple, smart things. And if your community is well organized and they invest appropriately in these things, this stuff doesn't have to happen. If this is not, God didn't do this to us. We did this to ourselves.
I think it's a very good point of emphasis to suggest that anybody who's watching what's taking place there, make sure that you know what your community's plans are and what processes they have in place right now for any sort of specific emergency, and take those cautionary measures seriously so that you know how to protect your family in an instance like this. It is horrific. And I was not comforted by the president's visit or his words. But at this point, I don't know that we should expect to be.
Well, the other kind of story, again, which we don't talk about because the media doesn't want to talk about this, is so he immediately says, "Oh, well, now we need billions, more damage for disaster response." Well, why is that? Well, we have depleted the disaster response fund because we diverted all of it to supporting illegal aliens and a bunch of COVID stuff, much of which was just nonsense, just kind of wasteful spending. Here's some COVID money, go, build a gym or something like that. And then they turn right around and say, "Oh, well, now we need more money." Look, Department of Homeland Security, what do they do? They're out, censoring people and investigating them and basically running the world's largest human trafficking network. We created the Department of Homeland Security to deal with disaster response and this stuff, and they're not doing their day job. And then we waste all this money, and then these things happen, and then we need to spend more money. This is a very powerful moment for people to understand what the consequences of, honestly, for woke government, for people who have more important things to do other than, the basic blocking and tackling and of running a community or state or country for that matter.
Yep, it's a wake up call, and I know there are a lot of people and families that are going to need our prayers as Maui and Lahaina look to recover. Jim, thanks for kind of going off the normal beaten path in our conversations and talking about this, because I think it's a story that's not getting enough attention. So I'm glad you helped us with that today.
No, that's the stuff I know about.
Yeah.
Even though I am. By the way, the reason why I'm in Budapest. Right? I opened for Tucker Carlson.
Really?
I'm not joking. There's this fest, and he's talking, and we just did a panel before he talked, and then after him, there's a big gypsy band.
Oh, you were living
sounds like really cool.
Yeah, you were living the life, Jim Carafano. Thanks for letting us share a little part of it this afternoon.
All right, thanks for having me.
Of course. Bye-bye. Senior Counselor to the President and E.W. Richardson Fellow for International Engagement at the Heritage Foundation, Jim Carafano, our friend here on the Annie Frey Show.